I have to let myself record.
Is it coming through?
Yes, it's coming through.
I only see Karina. Is that, or do we have everybody else with our cameras off?
No, right now it's just like Karina is spotlighted. And so
Now I see it. It was my view. I see it.
I think, do I have to pin, like, do we have to pin if there's another speaker? Karina, do you know?
You could also spotlight, I think if it's yourself, if you'll be speaking, you can spotlight yourself, and if Jennifer will be speaking as well, she can also be spotlit, so we'll all be up there.
Okay. Yeah, we could just spotlight, like I can spotlight your video, Amy, when you come on. And
Okay.
And I'll spotlight mine when I come on. Okay, so I'll go ahead and let's try and do that. Let people in. Hola, buenas tardes. Hello, good afternoon. Gracias por acompañarnos. Thank you for joining us. Soy Betty Marín, directora asociada de programas de ACTA. I'm Betty Marín, Associate Program Director with ACTA. Soy una persona chicana con cabello chino y llevo lentes. I'm a Chicana person with curly hair and glasses. Voy a hacer un breve anuncio bilingüe en español y en inglés y luego vamos a iniciar con el programa. I'm going to do a brief announcement in Spanish and English, and then we will continue with the program. Si no eres bilingüe, disculpen, avisándoles que este es un evento bilingüe entre en español y en inglés. So letting you all know this is a bilingual event in Spanish and English. Si no eres bilingüe en español y en inglés, puedes escoger la opción de interpretación en la parte de abajo de tu pantalla, haciendo clic en el globo o escogiendo los 3 puntos bajo más en tu teléfono. If you're not bilingual in Spanish and English, you can choose the interpretation option at the bottom of your screen by clicking on the globe or choosing the 3 dots under More on your phone. Para personas usando ASL, pueden ver a la intérprete en su pantalla y pueden escoger PIN o ampliar la ventana del intérprete si gustan. For ASL users, you can see the interpreter, the ASL interpreter on the screen, and you can choose to pin their video or make it larger or smaller, also by clicking on the 3 dots on their window. Si prefieren leer subtítulos en inglés del audio en vivo, pueden escoger subtítulos en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. If you prefer to read English captions of the live audio, you can choose captions at the bottom of your screen. Vamos a probar la interpretación ahora. We're testing the interpretation between Spanish and English now, entre español y inglés. Entonces, si has escogido...
So if you have chosen English as your preferred language, you should be listening to the interpreter at this time, saying this in English. You can click on Silence Original Audio if you would like to listen to the original speaker.
You should be hearing the interpreter say this in Spanish now. You can click Mute Original Audio if you prefer not to hear the original speaker. Para crear un espacio bilingüe, vamos a limitar un poco el uso del chat.
So in order to create a bilingual space, we're going to limit the use of the chat a little bit. If you are bilingual, please share in both languages. If you are not bilingual, we will support you by reading as much as we can whatever is placed in the chat, reading it out loud so that it can be interpreted. If you have any issues with the interpretation in any of the languages that we are using and presenting in today, please let us know so that we can help you. We would like to thank all of the interpreters who are here today supporting us with our event. Leah and Nico are interpreting between English and Spanish, and Keturah and Corina are interpreting into ASL. Gabriela is doing the subtitles into English. So thank you all for your support in creating this multilingual space. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our Executive Director, ACTA's Executive Director, Amy Kitchener, to begin the scheduled programming. Thank you, Betty.
Co-founder and executive director of Alliance for California Traditional Arts. I use she, her pronouns. I appear as a fair-skinned person with medium brown shoulder-length straight hair, 50-something and wearing cat glasses. I'm zooming in from my home on Yokuts territory in Central California. And if you've not already introduced yourself in the chat, please do so now. I see many familiar names here and also a lot of new ones. I'm extending a warm welcome to you all and sharing my excitement and gratitude around the launch of the expanded Living Cultures Grants Program for 2023. Over time in our history, we've made over 1,660 grants and contracts totaling over $7 million across the state. This is the 18th year of the Living Cultures Grants Program, and we have expanded funding from the California Arts Council with a historic $1 million allocation to the folk and traditional arts. This is the first time in over 20 years that there's been a direct budget item at the state for folk and traditional arts at the California Arts Council. And we'd like to thank Director Jonathan Mosconi and the California Arts Council for recognizing the need and opportunity to support this field, and also for selecting ACTA as their administering organization to steward the grant making, which also builds on our 24 years of partnership working as the state's folk and traditional arts program. We'd also like to thank two private foundations, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation and the Walter and Elise Haas Fund, and our wonderful colleagues at each of these foundations for their long-term support of ACTA and this grant-making program over the past 18 years. In 2023, we have a total funding pool of $850,000. And for the first time, we'll be supporting individual artists and culture bearers in addition to organizations. So you can apply as an individual artist. We're eager to share more about the specifics of the program, and I'll pass it back to Betty Marin now. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Amy. Y quiero de
Thank
nuevo
you, Amy. Once again, I would like to thank all the folks who are here. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I am going to be speaking in both languages. One part of the program I will speak in Spanish, and the other half I will speak in English, but you can always choose whatever language you prefer using the globe interpretation icon. So this way we have a little bit of a balance between both languages. So just to let you know, as you might know, this session is about our Living Cultures Grant Program, as Amy just mentioned. We're going to talk a little bit about, do a brief overview of ACTA, and then a brief overview of traditional arts. What do we mean by this term? And then we'll give you an update on the apprenticeship program, do a little summary of the Living Cultures Grant Program. We will have time for Q&A to be able to answer your questions. And we will do an overview of how you use Submittable to apply. And then we will have some closing announcements at the end, and that's it. Okay, with that, if we can move to the next slide, please. All right, what is ACTA? It is a nonprofit which was founded in 1997. What we do, our work entails promoting and supporting traditional art so that they can thrive now and also in the future. We do this through sharing resources such as this grant. Other forms of support include technical assistance through funds. And we also create spaces for connection for different traditional artists and organizations to connect in the state of California. Next slide. Okay. I'm sure most of you are already very connected to this idea of traditional arts, but just so that we're all on the same page, when we are speaking about traditional arts, what we mean is a common heritage, art that's linked together through common heritage. They are linked together through language, religion, occupation, or a shared region. These arts represent a form of collective wisdom when we're talking about traditional arts, as well as shared aesthetics. We also know that traditional arts are practices that affirm the culture of a community. Just, some ideas so that to put them on the table so that we all know what we're talking about when we discuss traditional arts. Next slide. Okay, so today what we're talking about is the Living Cultures grant, but we do want to mention another grant we have available, one that's very important to our organization. It's called, well, okay, it's not a financing, it's a contract really. It's a program, an apprenticeship program, where we hire mentors who are based in California. We offer them a $5,000 contract to offer intensive one-on-one training from 6 months to a year to an eligible apprentice. So this grant cycle just wrapped up May 3rd of this year. So for folks who are interested to learn more about the apprenticeship program, you can visit our website. So here it's at the bottom on your screen on the slides, actaonline.org/apprenticeships. You can learn about the program there, eligibility requirements, but you won't be able to apply until next year, 2024. More or less spring is when our application will open and up again. So, stay tuned. Check out our social media and stay up to date with our newsletter to know when that call will be opened. Okay, I'm going to shift over to English now.
So today's focus is talking about our Living Cultures grant. We have a wonderful tradition of the Diablos tradition coming from Oaxaca that we have shown here on the screen. And these are folks who have received actually support from the Living Cultures grant in the past. We can go to the next slide. So just some quick kind of overview of dates and key dates. The grant opened just recently, and so we're keeping it open for about 2 months. And so it's going to close basically at the end of the day, July 3rd. That's a Monday. It's the Monday before the July 4th holiday. So, please take your time in the next couple months to review the guidelines, reach out to me with any questions, and hopefully get your application in before 11:59 on July 3rd. But that's until, the time until it will be open. And as Amy mentioned as well, for the first time, we're supporting individuals through this grant. They're $5,000 grants for individuals. For organizations, it's a $12,500 grant. Once we receive and process applications, we'll be able to notify grantees by early fall, which is when the grant period begins. So it's a 12-month period between September 1st of this year through August 31st of next year, 2024. Right, so we'll move on, please. So jumping into eligibility. So first starting with individual artists. So for the individual artists and or culture bearers who are eligible, they're folks who are based in California. And we're also inviting folks who have been rooted in a tradition that they have been practicing for at least 5 years. And we know different traditions, there's kind of different standards around the level of practice, but we are opening this to folks who have more experience in a particular tradition. This is not necessarily for folks who are just coming into something, right? Just learning about it. So at least 5 years of practice. Also artists, culture bearers who are at least 18 years of age. And also clear that the artist and culture bearer can actually receive the taxable income in California. So in the case of individual artists and culture bearers, you do not need to apply with a fiscal sponsor. It's directly for the artist / culture bearer. We can go to the next slide. So now when we think about organizations / community groups / tribal nations, we are asking that it's organizations whose annual budget is under 500,000. Also, we're inviting nonprofits with 501c3 status based in California to apply. For community groups and other organizations who do not have that nonprofit status, that's when you can apply with a fiscal sponsor. Also, a fiscal sponsor with that 501c3 nonprofit status. And we're also noting that we understand that tribal nations in the state of California, some are coming with federal status, some do not have federal status. So, different types of organizations. So when we talk about the budget size, the $500,000 budget limit, we're really speaking to the cultural departments of the tribal nations. So cultural programs of tribal nations in California with federal status, and then cultural programs of tribal nations in California who don't have federal status, but who can also apply with a fiscal sponsor, a nonprofit fiscal sponsor. We have a ton of, maybe not a ton, but a number of resources on our website about, if you don't already have another organization that might be a fiscal sponsor, we have some resources where you can look up, how do you find a fiscal sponsor? What is a fiscal sponsor? What does that mean? But it's essentially an organization that's taking on the financial responsibility of the grant. And usually it means that organization is taking a percentage of the grant amount to basically manage the money and also, take on whatever tax, basically that they would take on the reporting around the taxes for that grant. So those are just the basic eligibility points for both individuals and organizations. We can go to the next slide. So this is the boring and not fun slide, but I just wanted to kind of get this out of the way so that folks understand, what is not eligible, so that you don't waste your time and apply with anything related to these things. But firstly, we're not supporting general operating. So we are only supporting specific activities that are going towards some sort of end or project. And I'm going to give you a bunch of examples. So it can just be a general, general expenses of your organization or as an artist. We also cannot support work that's happening in like during the school day in educational institutions, whether they're universities or K through 12 schools. The grant can't be used as a kind of compensation or credit for a full-time student in a degree program. We are not supporting out-of-state travel. We are not supporting projects whose main purpose is fundraising. And also projects who are based on the interpretation of a cultural tradition instead of the actual tradition or cultural art form itself. And I think as folks who are doing this work in cultural practices, you'll be able to recognize yourselves and understand, what we mean by something that's simply an interpretation versus something that's really part of your everyday and the cultural life of your community. And then we are also, we're not able to support basically separate applications for the same activities or projects. So for instance, if multiple groups or artists are applying to present or, some work that's culminating in a single festival, for instance. So it's just important to understand because as individual artists and as organizations, you're actually eligible to apply for both grants. So whatever your proposal is, it has to be supporting distinct activities, different activities. And we're not able to to support the same activity for multiple proposals. If we can go to the next slide. So to focus on what we actually fund. So these are kind of the key themes that are going to guide us in the work that we want to support with the Living Cultures Grant. So nurturing cultural continuity is an important one, and we're often seeing that through the learning and the practice of traditional arts. We're also supporting work that's about sustaining cultural practice, and that can sometimes look, it happen through purchases and services. And we're also thinking about how folks are using the traditional arts to engage their own communities and also others through, a variety of public programs. So those are the kind of like three very broad areas that we're thinking about. And so now I'll give you some examples of what we mean by these things. We can go to the next slide. Ok, voy a cambiar de nuevo al español.
So I'm now going to switch to Spanish. So we want to give some examples. When we talk about being able to continue cultural practices and sustain them through workshops and meetings, being able to gather artists, cultural bearers, to talk about themes and subjects. It can also include intergenerational classes, other educational programs. And since what we just mentioned previously, because you cannot do these programs during the school day, but you can do them after school. And that's many times in English called after-school programs. That is eligible. And you can also do conservation projects or the rehabilitation of languages in danger of extinction. And when we talk about that in the context of cultural arts, one project that is about food, which is a cultural art, traditional art, and you can use that to use food to use the language. You can also use the funds to buy material and tools that could include instruments, the conservation of different traditional important art materials, the restoration of those materials. It can also include documenting arts, presentations, performances. So for example, you could pay a professional to make a video of your work or to get photos, professional photos of your work. And thinking about what you most need as an organization for stability, you could also hire a graphic designer to create a website or to improve it. That would be another example. And public performances like concerts, community concerts, festivals, exhibitions that foster community engagement. So many of the examples that we have created in our history of ACTA have come from the experiences that we have of working with organizations. As we talked about, we are now opening it to individual artists. So we'd like to tell you to know as an individual artist, what proposal could I turn in? What's eligible? The most important thing is to ask yourself, how is this activity going to be supporting my individual cultural practice? How is it going to help you develop your individual practice? If you are a cultural bearer or an individual artist, applying for this grant. Next slide.
Okay. Entonces, otras guías lo que vamos
So some other guides that the panel is going to use when they go over your applications are these criteria. The first is traditionality and relationship to community. This is very key. What is the art form, this traditional art form, and what does it mean in the community in which it's practiced? That is essential for traditional arts. Second, what is the artistry demonstrated by the featured artists and other key individuals? So we're going to be able to see that through the examples that you show, the work examples. The third one, the viability of the proposed activities as evident in a clear request and timeline and appropriate budget. So it's going to be very simple what you're putting into the application. But you are going to basically describe what you're proposing, how you're proposing to use the funds. You're going to propose a short list of 4 key things in your timeline, and your budget is going to have the expenses that you will need for the activities that you are describing. The fourth one, urgency related to endangered or marginalized art forms, endangered languages, the age of culture bearers, and something that's maybe related to the social or political context and other reasons. So when we talk about traditional arts, we're aware that in many contexts, there are endangered languages, there are cultural bearers that are older, and perhaps in their cultural community, there's not many other leaders or elder people who have that knowledge. Or it's a social or political context that is especially important, that has to do with the cultural practice. So putting that into the application will also help us why we should support the work in this moment. And the last one is the impact and assessment of successes and challenges. In this case, we want you to tell us your standards for success, and for you to tell us how you're going to evaluate based on your own standards. It's not necessarily coming from us, but the standards of how you're going to evaluate your success comes from you. Next one, thank you. So, to review what the process is going to be, there's going to be a panel. They're cultural specialists. It could be artists, cultural bearers, people who have studied that art form, people who know the cultural practices and who know the communities. Those people are going to look over the applications, and they're going to create a recommendation of which ones should receive funding. And then we're going to send that recommendation to our board for them to, and once it's approved, then we will let you know. And we can go to the next one. So I was talking a little bit about this before, but once you see the application, it's quite simple. You're going to answer, it's like 4 questions where you will describe the criteria that we just talked about. And then you're going to have the budget that I mentioned, your timeline, your work samples. And it's very important that you choose work samples that are really going to show the work that you want to continue doing. And then you have the option to add a supplementary materials. That could be, for example, an article that came out in the press about your work, or something else about the work that you were doing publicly. And with that, we can go to the next one. So we talked about this. I don't know how much I need to emphasize this again. We do have these timelines, July 3rd, and you'll be notified in the fall. And then the grant period is from September to August. Next one. So right now we're going to take a moment to respond to your questions, but just want to let you know, we do recommend that the application be done online. And Jen is going to go over this in just a second. You do have the option, if you want to do it in on paper, and you can ask a copy from us in case you do not have access to internet. Next one, please.
I know it was a lot of information. I personally feel tired of talking for the last almost 20 minutes. So we want to take a little pause here and hear from you all. And I know that there's lots of activity in the chat. And I think Amy has been responding to some questions. But yeah, let's open it up here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen, down here in Los Angeles. I am an associate program director at ACTA as well, stewarding the apprenticeship program. And I am a 36-year-old white person of largely British Isles descent with brown hair, and I'm wearing a yellow top. And I'm going to start right at the beginning just so that we can voice out all the different questions and make sure that we're recording all those responses. So Dina asks, could a culture practitioner apply for the individual fellowship or grant at the same time as the organization they are affiliated with that is also applying for the Living Cultures grant?
Thank you. Yes, yes, you can apply both as an individual and as an organization. The catch is that you have to apply for different activities. So the funds have to be supporting something different. So there's some examples that we've placed on our website, but for instance, maybe a dancer wants to support, the development of a choreography, and they want to work with somebody to do that. And then separately, their organization is holding a festival, presenting, other artists and other activities. That would be just like a quick example, but the point is they have to support different activities. But yes, individuals and organizations are eligible to apply if they're from the same organization.
Monse has a specific example request. Monse is asking un evento comunitario para celebrar Día de los Muertos.
A community event
en
to
una
celebrate Day of the
comunidad
Dead
con
in a
artistas,
community
madres de
with
Oaxaca.
mother artists from Oaxaca. If the question, Monse, is if that project is eligible, the one that you just mentioned, yes. From what I understood in brief, it does seem as though a festival, a community gathering, that involves cultural bearers, totally. So if you have other questions, Monse, please let us know. What I have not mentioned yet is that you can also sign up to speak with me outside of the session. I will share that link in the chat if you would like to sign up for a one-on-one conversation to speak a little bit more in detail about your proposal.
Nina asks, I'm part of a community group that is a program under a community center that is a program under a nonprofit fiscal sponsor. The community group is not directly under the fiscal sponsor. Would the $500,000 organizational budget limit apply to our community group or to the community center?
So community group under a community group within a community center that has a fiscal sponsor. Is that right? And does the budget size apply to the community group? Did I get that question right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, the budget size applies to the applicant. It does not apply to the fiscal sponsor. So the fiscal sponsor can have a budget size that's larger than 500,000. But yes, the budget limit applies to the applicant organization. And I'm sorry?
Sorry, just to clarify, that applicant organization, are they required to be a program under that fiscal sponsor directly? Because in our case, that would be the community center, which probably does have a huge budget, but our specific community group does not.
Oh, I see. Can you, I think I understand what you're saying. You're basically a community group that participates within a community center, which is a separate entity.
Yeah, we're the taiko drumming group.
And so yes, you would be applying as the taiko drumming group and your budget size as the taiko drumming group. You wouldn't be applying as the community center. If you wanted, but you would just need to decide who your fiscal sponsor is. And then you would note that information. But again, the fiscal sponsor does not have to be under the $500,000 limit. It's you as the taiko drumming group.
All right, and as the taiko drumming group, we would not have to directly be a program of the fiscal sponsor.
No, you actually do not have to be a program of the fiscal sponsor. They're simply acting in that, basically taking on the role of fiscal sponsor, but you don't have to be a program of theirs.
Great, thank you so much.
And I also just take the opportunity to mention that fiscal sponsors who do happen to be under the $500,000 budget limit, they can also apply separately as their own, put in their own proposal, their own application for the program, in addition to also serving as a fiscal sponsor for a different applicant organization.
Carolyn asks, hello, does ACTA still maintain the practice of organizations sitting out for a year after 3 years of consecutive funding?
Thank you for asking that. Because we have expanded funding this year, Carolyn, we are not creating that barrier this year for organizations who have been receiving our funding in the past. So that's not a concern this year.
Sweta asks, this is Anita from the Bay Area. The Living Cultures grant says it does not support out-of-state travel. My question is, can a part of it be used if I take lessons from my teacher who is out of state?
We've gotten this question in other ways, and I feel like I have to review my notes about what we said. And Amy, if you want to chime in here.
Do you need to dial a colleague?
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Hi, Anita. So like, I think if you're asking for, it could pay artist fees, right?
Mhm.
For the artist, for your teacher who's out of state, but not the actual travel to go out of state.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. So I can use it towards the expenses for, learning the lessons from the teacher.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And the applicant artist would be getting the grant directly and then distributing that funding as needed for their proposal.
Well, also, Anita, it depends on what, is this as an individual, or is this as an individual or as an organization? Because they work a little differently. For the individual artist grant, the grant will go directly to the applicant artist, and the purpose is supporting the artist practice, which could be learning from your teacher out of state, in which case you're going to receive the $5,000 grant, and then you will deploy it as you need to, right?
Okay.
If you're an organization applying for this, the grant would be $12,500, and it would go to the organization, and the organization would pay out all the budget line items in your budget. One thing I'll say is, if it includes out-of-state travel, you can always use other sources of funding for that out-of-state travel. So, if you were having a festival with international artists, you could use a different funding source to bring those artists to California, and then you could pay them artist fees from the Living Cultures grant, as well as all the other kinds of production costs of the festival in California.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy asks, what kinds of work samples would be appropriate for submission?
Tracy, are you applying as an individual artist?
As an organization.
So I would include work samples that speak to your past work and speak to your proposal. Basically, it's the work samples are for the panelists to be able to see what is the work that you've already been doing in the community. How is it showing some of that review criteria in terms of the artistry of the artists involved, in terms of the traditionality and the relationship in the community. And then if it's, if you're applying for work that you've done already or similar work, then, work samples that are related to the proposal itself is also, are also important.
Okay, well, what we do, we have 2 cultural events a year. We have an acorn dance in the spring and a harvest ceremony in the fall. And we have dancers there. We make regalia. We do traditional crafts. So would you want pictures or videos of that? Or what would work as a work sample? And we have the community, the public is involved. We are in negotiations for a gift shop and cultural center with California State Parks. We've got a lot of stuff going on, but I didn't know exactly what I could submit within a grant application.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the grant, once you go on the application itself, you'll see that we're having you kind of identify the key traditional art forms that the proposal is speaking to. So depending on the focus of the request, you would choose, what it sounds like a lot of them are material based. And so for that option, we basically focus on photographs, and we have a requirement to include 5 to 10 photographs. And then we also have the option to add a video, since we know, some of this work also might be presented in a video form, especially like you said, it's happened in a festival. So those would be, the options for work samples. And then I would be happy to just speak with you one-on-one and talk more about, exactly what you want to do, and just guide you a little bit more with more specifics.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a quick general note that we will be sharing the recording of this session both in English and Spanish. We will have the recordings posted to ACTA's YouTube page either toward the end of this week, certainly no later than Monday. Jessica asks to clarify the eligibility for the organizational/community group grant. Does the organization have to be a 501c3 status at the federal level, or can it qualify if the organization only has California nonprofit state level designation?
I'm actually not familiar with the difference, but my understanding is we just need your California nonprofit status. And the only reason we mention federal status is when we're speaking about tribal nations who have that designation at a federal level. And yeah, Amy or Jen, if you want to
I
add.
was clear, a 501c3 is the federal designation for a nonprofit. And that's what we're looking for either the fiscal sponsor, if you don't have 501c3 status. But we definitely want 501c3 status, which is the federal nonprofit status.
Anita asked again, do you review applications and offer feedback? If so, what are the deadlines for that?
We typically won't review an application as a whole, but we will, speak with you one-on-one, and I can review, sections of it. You can tell me about it. We can look at work samples. So I haven't set like a specific deadline for that type, but I do have the one-on-one sessions just available and open basically through the whole application period. So I think as long as you're able to grab one of those times, we can look at those aspects together. So the sooner you want to do that, obviously, the better for you to just be able to make revisions. But right now it's open for the application period.
Carolyn asks, can project funding include different aspects? For example, some funding to purchase instruments and some funding for improving the website. Also, do the community concerts, festivals, etc. have to be free of charge, or can a small admission fee be charged? Or is that considered a fundraising event?
Great questions. So yeah, you can have multiple activities that you're supporting through the project request. We would just want to understand clearly, what are your goals for these different activities? How are they supporting and sustaining the work of your organization? And then the last part, I'm sorry, what was the last part again?
Can you charge admission or small admission, or does that put it into the category of a fundraising event?
Amy, why don't you answer that one?
Oh, of course you can charge admission. Like earned income can play a really important role in an organization's sustainability. But I think, one of the, to show that in your budget, under income and expenses. And I think, one point would be just, that it's accessible to the community, and maybe you address that in your narrative. But of course you can have a admission charge.
Kyle asks, would a project rooted in an American tradition like folk or bluegrass music be appropriate for this grant program?
Yes, definitely. We include that in our definition, understanding of folk and traditional arts, traditions rooted in a particular cultural community. So certainly.
Tracy asks, what about the grant end reporting or final reporting?
Through our partnership with the California Arts Council, we are kind of stewarding these grants through the end of the year, which actually is only part of the grant period. So what we're going to be asking grantees is to kind of do it will be kind of like a quarter-way check-in once they receive the funding, to just hear how things are going, if they're facing any challenges. But right now we don't have a requirement for a final report. And Amy, I don't know if you have any other information about whether there would be any final reporting other than what we're requiring through the end of the year.
We're planning for a midpoint report at this point.
And Carolyn asks a question that I think has mostly been answered, but just to make sure, can funds be used to pay for travel costs to bring teaching artists from Mexico to provide a workshop for our youth?
So no, they cannot be used for bringing artists from outside of the state. But as Amy had mentioned earlier, we're able to support, like if those artists, if you're finding other funds to bring those artists here, then you're able to use the funding to pay them.
Vladimir asks a question in Espanol. Los proyectos van a tener
Vladimir dice,
recomendaciones de los
asks,
evaluadores una vez revisados.
are the projects going to have recommendations from the evaluators once they are reviewed?
Gracias.
Betty, did you hear it? Do you want me to answer?
Oh, I was just waiting to get the actual question from Jen, but if you heard it, go ahead. I don't think I
Oh, I had it. It was translated in my translation.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So Vladimir asked, are we going to share the review comments with the after they've been reviewed of the evaluators? And generally, we're happy to talk to you about the feedback that the reviewers gave or the comments, but we don't provide written comments. So after you're notified about your application, if you did not get it, contact Betty. She can give you some feedback and suggestions about how to possibly improve it in the future. And we've seen that so many times is with some constructive feedback and some more coaching, oftentimes people come back next time and are able to have a grant the following time. So usually we're in a position where we have way more really qualified proposals than we have funding for. And so I think we have a pretty good amount of funding this year, but I think it will still be competitive. And so just know that that we're here to support you as you go through the process, and also to offer constructive feedback if you do not get the grant.
Betty, do you want to respond to Vladimir's second question just below?
Sure.
Yeah.
Now I see it. Entonces, Vladimir dice, los proyectos van a tener recomendaciones. Oh, yeah, es la que acabamos de ver. Las agrupaciones o individuales que obtuvieron los fondos.
The organizations or individuals who got funds, will they be able to participate in grants for 2024 and 2025? Vladimir, right now we don't know, because we don't know how much funding we're going to have next year. We only know the funding that we have for this year. So we don't know the guidelines that we're going to create for the future grants in 2024, 2025. But thank you. And also, I see that Juana sent me a question if her work would be eligible. Juana Mena here is a quilter. And yes, Juana, as you know, I think you know your work is part of traditional arts, and your work is very strong, it's very beautiful. And yes, definitely you can apply as an individual, or if you're doing work as a group, you can also apply as a group or organization.
Great, thank you. Christina asks, I recognize that organizational grant funds cannot be used for out-of-state travel. Can they be used for other expenses relating to performing outside of California?
Could you say a little bit more about what you mean? Would you be applying? Yeah, I think I would have to understand a little bit more about what the application proposal is. But if it's more comfortable, maybe we can just talk on a one-on-one. Like my initial instinct is that if it's not happening in California, it would be hard to fund it, but I would need to understand better your proposal.
Okay.
Hi, Betty. I had a similar question, so maybe if Christina's not explaining it, her question, I just wanted to take this opportunity to ask you this one. Like, basically, we are a nonprofit group. I'm planning to take a lot of young students who are learning music and living here in the Bay Area to an international music festival in Cleveland, Ohio in April 2024. To participate in an international festival where students from all over the country come and perform. So travel is not allowed, but other expenses, any other expense relating to taking the students from here to perform in a festival, international festival, any expenses can be covered.
Do you mean like the preparation that the students would undertake in order to be
Yeah,
ready?
the preparations would happen in the Bay Area, but then the performances will happen there. So we have to go there a day before or 2 days before and then do some rehearsals there, renting some rehearsal space, you know, to do it with the other accompanist or somebody from who might be joining us there, and then presenting it and maybe accommodation for a night or something for some people, if not all, like.
Mm-hmm. I think I'll ask Amy to add anything, but my sense is that it would need to support the aspects of, like, I understand that it sounds like a really rich opportunity for the students and it's about their development, you know, as artists, and yeah, my quick sense is that it would, that the whatever preparation activities that you're supporting would need to be happening in advance of the trip, as opposed to supporting activities that are happening on the trip itself. And I see Amy nodding, so it sounds like that's probably what's going to make most sense for the grant. But again, happy to kind of dig in a little further with you if you'd like to sign up for more time.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
And yes, we should be moving on pretty soon. I don't know if there was any other.
There are maybe 4 other questions, but should we move on to the submittable review, or what would you like to do?
Can we do one more question and then
Okay.
I will download the chat and also just follow up with everyone so you can sign up for time if you'd like. But hopefully we can get to at least one more.
Mona asks, in providing work samples, if we provide a link to a video sample, how long should it be?
Yeah, great. Usually what we suggest is that and we ask you to kind of just specify the time that we should watch in the video, but a couple of minutes is usually what we're seeking. So you can have a video that's longer than that, but just note on your application which part of the 2 to 3 minutes that the panelists can review. Hopefully that answers your question. And yeah, so why don't we take a little, we'll kind of move to give you all an overview of Submittable. And then if we have a little bit more time at the end, we'll try to catch a few more questions. But I'm going to pass it over to Jen to show us a Submittable.
Okay, just a brief introduction to our online application system, Submittable. So here you are on the home page of ACTA, actaonline.org. You can click through this way or find the Living Cultures Grant Program here under Our Work. If you'd like to view the page in Espanol, you can click here to view the same information. And all of the most essential information is here, as well as where to sign up for a short session conversation with Betty, information about upcoming programs and events, and the full program guidelines are here. After you review the guidelines, you can click here to submit. And this is where you will find our application portal. You will find your application in English or in Spanish. You can click through and you'll be met with some brief information about this funding opportunity. The first thing you will see is a series of eligibility questions, and you'll pass through these questions once. It just helps you understand if you are or are not eligible, and then you won't see them again. So in this case, to demonstrate, we will respond briefly. Let's do this one. Yes. So if you choose individual artist or organization, you might be met with a few different questions there. You must be 18 years or older if you're an individual and a resident of California and practicing your art form for at least 5 years and able to receive payment via tax ID number. So we're going to proceed through the eligibility form. It will pop you back out to the top of the full application. So you're going to scroll down and there you will see all of the fields on your application. So some pretty straightforward fields for you to respond to narrative questions. This is where you will upload work sample materials related to either your practice or the work of your organization. And you will have slightly different fields depending on that category. And it will guide you through that process to upload your material and respond with any other related information. You can also provide some supplemental materials here by choosing a file. I think more than one file, up to 2 files, it looks like. And here is the budget form. This is a reference example for you. And then down below, you'll see the actual form where you can place your information directly into the fields here. Just to demonstrate, you can put numbers directly in, and at the end, you should just simply make sure that everything is totaling the full grant amount. And there's also an option to upload a budget form if you need more space than this above form. Here's a project timeline example, and then we guide you through the process of building out the project timeline on Submittable. And then this is where you will hit submit. Just so you're aware, you can save as you go. You're going to have to start a Submittable online account. So you'll register with an email that will allow you to save your work as you go so that you don't have to complete the entire application in one sitting. So you can work on it. It should auto save. It's always good practice to just pop down to the bottom and hit save draft just to be safe. And then when you are complete and ready to submit your application, you will hit the submit button and you should receive a confirmation message, and you also should receive a confirmation message in your email confirming that your application has been submitted. If you do not see that information, reach out to us and we'll follow up with you so that we can make sure to receive your full completed application. And that's just a brief introduction to Submittable. Back to you, Betty.
Gracias, Jen. Entonces, nada más para ir finalizando, manténganse en contacto.
So to start
Aquí
wrapping up, stay in touch. We will put the different links in the chat in just a moment, including links to our website so that you can follow us also on any of these socials, right? Our profiles will be under Caltrad Arts. You can also, sorry, can you go back to the previous slide? I'm also including, we have something that's called the California Traditional Artists Plaza. Amy, someone, if you could share the link to that in the chat. This is it's another resource that we have, online resource, where any traditional artist can basically upload a profile. And it's one way of sharing your information on our website. So folks who are seeking to hire traditional arts for their communities can look them up on this platform and find their information, what kind of things they offer, like classes, what kind of art they practice. We also encourage you to do this. I'm going to, thank you, Amy. Here are the two links to the Living Cultures website. Let's see, next slide. Aside from this session, we will also be going to different parts of the state to have in-person meetings. We will be in San Diego next week, and then in the Coachella Valley on the 25th of this month. We will be going to Humboldt County at the beginning of June, afterwards to Oakland, and then we will also have a session in Fresno with Amy. We will have another session in LA, but we still need to confirm details. If you live in any of these places, or if you know other artists or groups who might want to learn a bit more about this grant, this is another opportunity to learn more about eligibility, how the grant works, and to be able to ask questions and have conversation in a welcoming space. And I think finally, next slide. I think that with that, we will wrap up the session.
Judy, I see you just popped a question in there real quick. The $500,000 annual budget is for a fiscal year. So like looking at your organization and what your budget was for, you know, the last year or the year before that. And so that's what the limit is for related to that, not the grant period. Okay, pues muchísimas gracias a los intérpretes de nuevo, a Amy.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to our interpreters, Amy, Jen, for your support on this event. And we'll stay in touch. You have my contact info. I hope all of the details are on the website as well. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take good care. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Betty.
Yes.